For today's project, we're going to be using the Painterly Florals transfer from IOD. It comes in a set of 8 12 by 16 sheets, and these new pad formats are really great if you want to kind of like get a little bit creative with the design that you're putting on your furniture, so that you can sort of like cut out these elements and kind of build your own design, which is kind of cool. So all beautifully been hand painted transfers, so they're really pretty to add a little bit of texture to your next project. On a little smaller project today. We're not doing furniture. We're just going to make a cute little Valentines sign, and I've just had this scrap piece of wood in my pile, and I've just cut out, I'll put all the measurements in the description to make a frame, so we'll play around with that. I'll stain them and all that sort of stuff. The colors we're going to use today are Fusion Azure, and I may do a little bit of blending, but we'll just see how we go. So first up, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint this whole piece in the azure, and I'm just using my Klingon. It probably looks really super bright in the studio lights here, but it's quite a pretty, it is a bright color, but being Valentine's Day, I just always think of those conversational hearts, and they're always in pretty bright colors, so that's where I'm sort of drawing the inspiration for this sign from. So this is just one coat, and then I'll let that dry, and I'm just using my Klingon F30. It's a great little brush for little projects like this. Okay, and I'm just going to let that dry. Okay, so now that that's dry, I'm going to do a little bit of blending because it is quite a bright color. So I want to tone that down just a little bit. So I've just got my spray bottle, and I'm just going to lightly spray across the piece of wood. And I've just popped out some casement onto a scrap piece of paper. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up a little bit in my brush and wipe it off, and just going back over with the azure. So I'm going to go I'm sort of going to go down from dark to light, I think, or I may even do sort of like, because I'm doing a sign, I might even try and do it as like an oval. So what I want to do is go around the outside in the azure, so you got that, creating that sort of a oval effect. And then I'm going to pick up some of that white, I'm just going to go across the center of that. You want to just have something like a piece of paper or an old cloth, and you're just going to go around. And because it's quite hot here today, I'm probably going to need to spray it a little bit more often than I would, because the paint is drying really quickly. And you just keep moving it around until you get sort of like a nice blended effect, going backwards and forwards. Because it's only also a little piece of wood that I'm working on. If I was working on a piece of furniture, I would actually have a third brush for that white, but because I'm only working on a really tiny piece of wood, I'm just using the 2 brushes. hopefully you can see that that's starting to blend nicely. And you just want to sort of create a nice smoky effect. And if you happen to make a boo-boo the first time around, it's okay, because you can just come back after it's dry and fix up any issues that you've had. It takes a little bit of getting used to when you're blending, but it's a little bit of practice. Just on scrap pieces of wood like this, you'll be a pro before you know it. Okay, so I'm going to just let that dry, and then we'll come back and we'll start adding the transfers. Okay, so that's all dried now. As you can see, it's just softly, it probably looks actually in this video that it's quite harsh, the distinction between the blending here and the azure, but in real life it actually looks like it has been blended and the edges are really soft. I find when I'm recording or taking photos, it looks really harsh on the camera, but it's in real life it's not. So anyway, so once you're happy with the way your board is looking, you could do it in an ombre effect if you wanted to, so coming down dark to light, or light up to dark, or around the other way. It really depends on what you want to do. So next up now, we're going to work out which of the transfers we're going to use. So I really obviously adore the roses, and I think that that will look really pretty up against the azure. So you just pick out what sort of what design of the transfer that you want. So you just play around with it and add greenery. You could add lavender if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. And you kind of just don't ever take the backing piece off your transfer, otherwise it's gonna end up sticking to whatever you're working on. So I'm just going to cut out a few different sorts of pieces, probably not the big roses because they'll be a bit too big for this piece, and I'm just going to start building my design. So once you're kind of happy with how your display looks, you can obviously change this as you're going and you build your design. The one thing you've got to remember is to always start with the ones that you've put down underneath first. So you just kind of take what you've just done, take it back off, and then look at what's going on first. Move the backing paper and stick down and apply with the handy little tool that comes in the pad. And as always, you can see where the transfer is adhering to whatever you're working on, because the transfer goes white. So I'm just going to go ahead and just apply the transfers. So next up, I'm just going to stain the frame, and I'm going to be using Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stain. It's a really easy stain to use, water-based, and it's always good to give it a good shake just to make sure that all of the goodies inside are mixed up properly. And I'm just going to be using the gatohide sponge, which is a really great applicator because it actually gives you something to grip onto. So I'm just going to move very quickly because I don't want to, obviously this is slightly damp, and I'm just going to, you don't want to leave the Voodoo Gel Stain sitting too long on your wood, because otherwise you'll end up with actual lines. As you can see, it's a beautiful coloured stain and so easy to apply. Okay, so next up, I've just made a stencil using my cutting machine. You could use stickers, you could use stamps, you could do whatever it is that you want to do, or make your own stencil. These will be available over in my shop as well if you decided that you wanted to do something similar. But I'm just going to basically line this up with the sign. I'm probably going to push, just want to make sure that I don't get any of the letters onto the transfer. And I'm not going to push down onto the transfer too hard because I obviously don't want to lift that up when I remove the stencil. So once I've done that, I just get my little scraper and I'm just going to go over the design. Oops, not supposed to put that in the paint. And then just pull that off. Like so. Okay. So once I'm happy with that, I've just got a little makeup sponge and I'm just gonna load it up and then dab most of it off because I don't want this to obviously bleed underneath the stencil. And another little trick is to, with the wood that you, whatever wood that you use, you want to make sure that you give it a really good sand to remove any divots in the wood, because anything like that is going to create sort of like a little valley for your paint to get right up underneath your stencil. And I'm just going to pounce on. So once that's dry, I'm just going to really gently, carefully pull off the stencil, because you obviously do not want to take your transfer with it. I'm just going to remove gently all the little letter inserts. Okay, so you can see what it's going to look like with the frame. So it kind of tones that starkness down. If you wanted to, I'm actually going to splatter this just to give it a little bit of texture. So you want to make sure that everything is away from your frame and all that sort of stuff. And I've just got a thick bristled brush. I'm just loading it up. It's not wet. You don't want it to be wet because otherwise you'll end up with a really sort of gross sort of spluttering. And you just want to flick your paint. You can also do this with a toothbrush, but I don't have one on hand, so I'm just using a paintbrush. It's a thick bristle, and it just kind of adds a little bit of fun. Just bring that up to the camera so you can sort of see. And I'm just going to let that completely dry, and then we're going to put the frame on. Okay, so now that that is all dry, I'm now going to apply the frame. I'm just going to use wood glue because I don't have my nail gun here in the shop at the moment, but you could obviously use a nail gun, as I said. So what I'm going to do is just run a line of glue along each side and make sure that's sitting nice and snug against the frame, and leave it overnight to dry.